No. I used to spin it really fast, and it would pull me off the.
Oh my god, Emma pulled you off.
If you're like me, then you hate Thor Love and Thunder. And slowly over time after the release of that movie, a portion of the internet has convinced you that Thor Love and Thunder and Thor Ragnarok are the same in quality. Both directed by Taika Waititi and have a much more comedic take on Thor. Combine that with the continued disrespect of Hulk, and the internet gaslit you into thinking that Thor Ragnarok is a bad MCU movie. But it's not. Out of all of the movies in my current MCU rewatch, I think I was most afraid to rewatch this movie because I was afraid it would confirm what some people have said about this movie. But for the most part, I was pleasantly surprised. However, I still have my issues with it. First, let's talk about the decision to change the tone of Thor to a more comedic role. I totally understand why they would do this. Thor the Dark World was seen as very boring and dull, and Thor as a character was getting kind of stale. Chris Hemsworth said himself he was getting really bored with the character, and as an actor, he totally has the chops required to do comedic movies. Not to mention that Thor was pretty much the last character in the MCU to do quips and jokes, so it makes sense to go in this direction with a character to make the tone of the MCU more cohesive than it already is. I was afraid that there would be too many jokes like how Thor Love and Thunder was, and that those jokes would take away from the tone of the scene, but for the most part, this movie doesn't do that. Instead, I noticed a lot of jokes were either improvised or used to kind of distract from the exposition. The placement for both of these tools was used pretty frequently. Having seen Jojo Rabbit and The Hunt for the Wilder People as the only other Taika Waititi directed movies, I feel like he does a pretty good job balancing humor and drama, and I think Thor Ragnarok more or less fits in line with those movies. However, even though Chris Hemsworth is really good at playing himbo Thor, I feel like this choice just takes away from the one thing that makes him different than everyone else in the MCU. He's a god. Asgard is different from every other place. It's not like Earth, and it's not like the weird alien Star Wars stuff in the Guardians movies. It's supposed to be this fantastical realm akin to Game of Thrones. I want all the characters to speak old and timely. Thor does this in the comics, and it plays off the other characters really well. They even do this in previous Thor movies, which also worked really well. He talks differently because, he's over 1,000 years old and he's from a magical realm with no modern technology.
No, I don't have a phone, but you could have sent an electronic letter. It's called an email.
Yeah, do you have a computer?
No, what for?
Thor isn't the only character who's changed. Loki also has a much more comedic tone to him. The change is a bit more subtle, but he's a lot less sinister. The Executioner, played by Karl Urban, was changed to be more comedic than most adaptations of that character. He's normally the stoic muscle to Amora the Enchantress, a ruthless killer who's a physical match for Thor. But in this movie, not so much. He's shown to be more of a sympathetic character as he doesn't really want to kill anyone, but he also doesn't want to die by the hands of Hela. He has his moment of redemption as he sacrifices himself to save the ship carrying all the Asgardians. Which is kind of nice from a storytelling perspective, I guess, but I would have much rather seen him and the Enchantress star in their own Thor movie as proper antagonists. I feel like the Enchantress and the Executioner are right behind Loki in terms of popularity when it comes to Thor villains. Kind of crazy how we got Malekith, Curse, and Surtur before a proper adaptation of those characters. And speaking of adaptations, I guess now is as good a time as any to address the green elephant in the room, Hulk. This is the first time I rewatched this movie after had reading the Planet Hulk comic. And boy, let me tell you, they do not even begin to scratch the surface of this story. But first, let me point out all the things in this movie that are actually in the comic. Hulk does crash on a planet called Sakaar, gets thrown in gladiator matches to compete for entertainment, meets Korg and Meek, wears this shoulder guard thing, and that's about where the similarities stop. In the comic, Hulk is sent into space without his permission by the Illuminati.
The Illumawati?
The Illuminati. They attempt to send his destructive ass to a peaceful planet with no life so he can't hurt anyone and no one can hurt him, but this pisses the Hulk off and he damages the ship, throwing it off course and landing on Sakaar. From there, he is enslaved and forced to fight in gladiator matches where he meets Korg and Meek. These two characters are wildly different in the comic, but both become inspired as they follow the reluctant lead of Hulk's heroic revolution to overthrow the king. Oh yeah, in the comic, the Red King is the malicious tyrant who rules Sakaar, not the Grandmaster, who is a different Marvel character not involved in the original story at all. Even though I like Jeff Goldblum a lot in this movie, the last thing I would describe his character as is malicious. Anyway, back to the Hulk. I feel like this is where Marvel really started to pick up steam on their train of disrespect when it came to the Hulk. I get that this is a Thor movie, so adapting more elements from the Planet Hulk comic wouldn't entirely work, but I would ask, why are you adapting the best and most popular Hulk story to just the second act of a Thor movie? If you like the Hulk stuff in Thor Ragnarok and haven't read the Planet Hulk comic, I would highly recommend you read it because it's such an epic dramatic story and it's a good entry point for new readers. You don't need to do any prior reading to enjoy this comic, and there's so much in it that didn't make this movie. This story deserved its own movie, maybe two, and World War Hulk could have rounded out a trilogy, but who knows if we'll get any of that within the next few years. It was kind of implied in She-Hulk that we might get a Planet Hulk movie because I guess Hulk has a kid now? Maybe Hulk will get the Black Widow treatment and get a prequel movie. Another insane way Hulk gets disrespected in this movie is his voice. They literally just put autotune on Mark Ruffalo's voice.
You're Banner's friend.
That's it? The Hulk hasn't spoken on screen since...
Hulk smash!
And that's all the vocal modulation you're gonna do? Once you notice it, it totally takes you out of the movie. He almost sounds like Machine Head from Invincible. Also, I think there's a slip up here when he says I instead of referring to himself in the third person.
No, sorry, I just get so angry all the time.
Now, let's get back to talking about Thor and the actual movie. I think a bit of an issue I have with this movie overall is that everyone feels like comic relief in this movie, and there aren't really any fully serious characters. I mean, Doctor Strange is the most serious character in this movie, and that says a lot.
The Illumawati?
Thor is supposed to be at his lowest after losing his hammer, his father, and is about to lose his home right after realizing he had a sister this whole time, but he's still cracking jokes and having a good time right about until he loses his eye. And even though he does show a lot of growth in this movie by learning to connect with his true power without his hammer, learning to not trust Loki anymore, and reluctantly taking the throne because there's no one else fit to rule, Thor is pretty manipulative in this movie. He doesn't consider anyone else's feelings or desires while on Sakaar, and he's just trying to get back to Asgard by any means necessary, which is pretty selfish, honestly. He tries to guilt Valkyrie into joining his fight after she told him repeatedly she's done fighting for his family squabbles after nearly losing her life against Hela the first time. He also tries to manipulate Hulk and Banner into helping him into his fight to take Asgard back, and Bruce actually calls him out on this.
Wait, you're just using me to get to the Hulk.
What?
It's gross.
What? No,
You don't care about me. You're not my friend.
No, I don't even like the Hulk.
The worst part is, they both agree to help because the movie needs to just keep going, I guess. Okay, I know I just kind of spent this entire video dumping on this movie, but I do think it's actually entertaining. I think the jokes are generally pretty funny. Even though all the characters are pretty comedic, I appreciate their inclusion, even if it is just fan service, because I think they all work pretty well together in this movie. I like the aesthetic of Sakaar. The weird techno space stuff is pretty cool. The action is incredible, and I love how action-packed this movie is. I honestly think it's the best stuff in the movie. I like the use of Surtur and all the foreshadowing to Ragnarok.
Do me a favor. Lock this away in the vault so it doesn't turn into a giant monster and destroy the whole planet.
And this Matt Damon scene might be one of the best cameos ever. Overall, I'm glad that the internet didn't make me misremember my feelings towards this movie because I genuinely enjoyed it and found it entertaining. But what do you think? Do you think this is one of the best MCU movies, or do you think it aged poorly after Thor: Love and Thunder? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you made it this far, please give this video a like. It would go a long way for me and my channel, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.